All right, we're getting back again today on the PE COFF parsing stuff. As a reminder, as I always do at the beginning, this project is funded by people like you who are watching and think it's cool and decide that they can afford $5 a month or $15 a month. There's also yearly options. I don't know if I've ever pointed this out, but you can get a little, you can get like a full year of these perks if you like, with a little discount. And people like you who watch and decide to support, that's what makes it possible for me to keep working on this. So I appreciate it if you do consider it. Now, I had some time to think. Yesterday, I was saying that, we could go after these constraints problems, we could go after the API problems, but we're not going to learn a whole lot about the format doing something like that. And so I think that the next step that makes sense for the project is going to be to try to build a DLL instead of an EXE and load that DLL. I think that's going to push us a little bit. We might have to do relocations, we might have to do exports, and that'll be fun. That'll be different. So let's make some changes. Let's try to get ourselves to a point where we're generating a DLL. Now, in order to generate a DLL and actually see that it's working, we're going to have to also have a test program that can run the DLL, right? So let's call this test load gen.c, something like that. And we're just looking to have a real simple setup here. Generated DLL. Then we're going to bring in I want to fill the square from the library with a thing named square. Okay. So now we need that, right? Okay, so we have test load gen, run fly. Currently, okay, so this is where things get weird. Oh, for coder's not good enough. It's just the truth. Okay. Let's take F5 for run test load. When I say 4-coder is not good enough, I mean like this right here, what I have to do right now is so annoying, and there are ways this could be better. This could be so good. Someone should make a good text editor with good command workflow features. Something like terminal click combined with a text editor. I don't know. I'm not sure. Doesn't matter. Point is, we want to go in there and run test load gen. Gotta load up our project. And we gotta run F5. And that's garbage. There we go. Now what we want to do is gen.c is currently making generated.exe. It's going to start making generated DLL. Question: would you ever take another shot at making an editor? 4-coder to Electric Boogaloo. Good reference. Yes, kind of. I'm not that interested in text files. You know, like this thing here. You see what? See how I'm creating? I'm trying to decide. You know, today's like chill vibes day. I'm not getting on my soapbox. Let's do this with a chill vibe. Here's the thing. It's like, it's kind of a bummer to look at text files all day. It's kind of a bummer. And I did a really good text editor, in my opinion. It's not good for everybody and for every purpose, but it's good for me. And I could make it better. I could make a better one. But text files are still a bummer. So if I was going to make a text editor, it would really be... It really wouldn't be a text editor. It might include a lot of the things that I'm complaining about being solved, like the ability to construct and run workflows like the one that I need right now more rapidly. And it might include the ability to edit text files technically, but it wouldn't be billed as and considered in my head strictly a text editor. If it had those capabilities, it'd be because they are supportive of a larger sort of plan, and I have some ideas of how that might work. I also have some ideas of like fun text editors I might want to do as a jam, but that I wouldn't actually think of as something to switch to. But I don't know. I don't really want to get bogged down in text editor is a big project, but like, let me just pitch you an idea. If anyone's listening and you're like, I want to do a cool text editor, I've been playing with this idea since like January or something, of this like way to make it fun, this way to like just change your perspective completely on what it means to build a text editor, which was like, what if instead of thinking about everything in terms of like commands that you bind to hotkeys and like how are you going to script up the commands and make them customizable or something, what if you started from the perspective of like a magic system from a video game? And what if what you were doing when you, instead of commands in your text editor, is you are taking that inspiration and you are coming up with new spells and meta magic systems for that run inside of the text editor. And as I thought about that, I came up with a lot of cool thoughts of like, here are things I would do. Here are ways I would have, you know, concentration spells, and I would have, you know, things that give you visual feedback on what you're doing and how you're doing it and what you did all the time. And it just changed my way of thinking about it. And I think someone could run with that idea and have fun with it. And I'd be curious to see what they came up with. I have ideas of what I would do with that, but I don't know if I ever will. Staring at text files is a bummer, man. So let's get back to it. Build up in smaller pieces. No. So what we're trying to do is figure out if we're ready. So main, look at that. Main got really small because we set up the thing and we lay it out and then we bake it. Oh, I love it. Okay. We're making progress. Real progress. Bake file. Okay, this right here. Here it is. PE flags. That's the one I'm looking for. All of these are very interesting questions. Like, they seem trivial, but this is the kind of stuff right here that we could spend like a week wrangling all the different options just for COFF and PE, and then later find out we have to redesign it again because ELF is totally different. It's like, you know, it's a couple of bits. You know, it's a couple of bits you're trying to control. And the fact that you want to abstract it and generalize it, together with the fact that it's so detailed and system specific at the same time, it leads to a lot of potential fiddliness. So being careful about how we hit that and hitting that with the exact right attitude in mind is going to be important. And I don't feel up for it today to like figure out what the right attitude is on those things. Okay, so we've generated our DLL, right? Let me see here. We need to get, just give me yeah, this spot. F generated DLL. Okay, so we're generating a generated DLL. This should still do nothing. But I guess I'm curious if we can do, like, if library does not equal 0. Okay, cool. So generated DLL isn't getting loaded, even though it's getting generated. So we've set up a real conundrum of a problem again. Let's try to do what we did before. We have mini ASM set up and ready to go. What if I made a version of mini ASM today that would just do the work of squaring? So I think what we're seeing here is we want to mov into EAX from EDI. We want to multiply EAX by EAX. Then we want to return. Right, this is canceled by this. This is just a stack pointer update, which gets... When does this get unrolled? RSP. Oh, this is a frame pointer update. We're moving EDI into this spot, moving this spot into EAX, and then multiplying. Yeah. Okay. Now, the other thing I need to do is I need to change this into a DLL. Link flags probably already knows how to do a DLL. There it is, dash DLL. Mini.dll. Got it. So it still wants an entry point. Let's do this. Cool. And so that should have generated... that should generate a main DLL. Mini DLL. Okay. 2 kilobytes. Now the question is, if I look at the load test, and I say, hey, sometimes I want you to just test mini DLL. Okay, so that works. So we can load mini DLL. We get wait, why are we getting oh. Interesting. So that's giving me library load failed too. Okay, I might need to dig in by doing something like going underneath the abstraction then. 132 impl. Yeah, this is all in base.c now, isn't it? oslib load library w. Get last error. One, 4. Okay, okay. So maybe it's the main needs to be smarter. Okay, let's try this. Let's rebuild mini. Then rerun. Library load success, procedure load fail. Okay, so now it's loading my DLL. That's cool. But it's not loading the square procedure. So I guess we need to figure out how to mark square for export. It might need to get marked here, or it might need to get marked here. Oh, let's go look at the linker. I'm gonna guess that this is a matter of Microsoft linker options. Exports a function. Let's try it. So we're going to try to export square. Okay, so the procedure loaded. But it's actually not working. Let me make sure. Okay, so should this be like ECX instead of EDI? Is that the difference? There we go. Okay. Now I don't understand why this is written this way. Like, this was what I pulled off of Godbolt. But this could be for a different EBI. So this square, but this square was also working, right? When we ran, yeah, this did work. How it worked, I don't know. It looks like it's basically putting whatever's in EDI into EAX and squaring it, and that doesn't actually work. Not sure. Oh, I guess this is also using the different ABI. Right. Well, as long as these two agree on their ABIs, then we're good. Okay. So we won't need more of this. Now the big question is, can I get it to load mine, right? So mine still doesn't load. Let us pull up our imhex now, and we're going to do the thing we did before when we got the generated exe working. We're going to do that again to get generated DLL working. We're going to compare it to the mini DLL until they are similar enough that it works. So here's mini DLL. Here's generated DLL. Yes. Okay, let me try that again. I think skipping through the UI was a bad idea. Let's do this. Boom. Yes. This. Boom. Yes. And here we go. Mini DLL. Generated DLL. All right. Let's see where these are not lined up. First things first, this. What is this? 3C. COFF header pointer. So they don't agree on this. It looks like the DLL, the mini DLL, is going to have a slightly bigger header. I still don't know what this garbage is, you know? Okay. So what sucks about that is the diffs aren't going to line up if they're not the same size. So I'm going to just copy this chunk. We're going to pop in over here on the gen.c where we have a PE DOS header. Now let's see here. I guess I'll take all of this. Copy as C array. All right, so I've rerun the generator, and now I got to redo the diff. Okay, so it agrees up to here now. I don't expect that. Question from the chat: is a PE COFF generator the same as a linker? Good question. Let me draw this for you. Okay. A linker is a program. I'm going to oversimplify here, but at the high level, what we're really thinking about when we build a linker is we have a list of files of the object type, and we are spitting out, let's call it a binary file. So a binary file can be an executable or a DLL, something like that, right? So this is a linker. A PE, let's just generalize here. A PE and COFF are the Windows format for binaries. So a binary generator, a PE COFF generator is the Windows version of a binary generator. Is anything, right? We can say like anything that takes in something or nothing. X can be, you know, whatever. For any X. Okay? So what I'm building right now is not a linker because I don't take in object files and piece them together, but you can see the similarity, right? They both have this end to the arrow. So this is like the back half of a linker that I'm building. Currently, my X in my generator is nil, right? My X equals nil, meaning I don't. You could call it void, or just, you know, the empty type. I don't have any input. I'm just generating a binary from code, and that is a perfectly valid choice for X. But a part of the point here is I want to master this half because I think linkers are kind of cool, but that we could do much cooler stuff if we had a better handle on this and we're free to play with the inputs, play with the timing of things, right? The linker is kind of into this locked in single plan way of doing it, and I want something that's like, okay, you could do it this way, or you could kind of wire it up with this thing that spits stuff out like this, right? I want flexibility. And so I am focusing on this half of the problem and hoping to come up with an abstraction plan. Duncan Stamp 23. Hey, sorry, I know I have like the 10-minute timer for new people, and you might have missed the window. Thanks for coming back to ask your question. You ask, I'm very curious to ask, do you play D&D? I have played D&D. I don't play regularly. I'm not a part of a regular group right now. Haven't been in years. And I've never been a part of a group that lasted for a very long time. Like I've done some, like, for one summer for a few weeks. Had some friends to do it, and I have played games that weren't D&D but tabletop role-playing games like that. Question, would it interest you to play again? Maybe. Yeah, I feel like I am interested. I guess I'm curious why you're asking. All right, this is the last question I'm going to ask because these are all off topic. What happened to my forehead is I bashed my head on my door this morning, or yesterday morning. But, yeah, sorry, I'm not going to answer any more off-topic questions. But welcome to the stream. If you want to chat about that, you can like message me privately when I'm not streaming, maybe, but probably not. Like I generally, yeah, I'll tell you why I laugh off the stream. Okay, so we are looking at the diff. C0. That's just a timestamp, right? Yeah, so we don't care about that part. Next diff, D2. Major linker version. Right, I just filled that with FFFF. What is this part, though, that you disagree with? Size of code. Okay, so this has a size of code of 512. And mine has a size of code of... what, 0? That can't be right. Can we just make sure that we've, like, rerun the pattern editor here? Okay, size of code 38. So I think what this is telling me... okay, let me actually change that. So we automated this yesterday. For each section that is containing code, we're going to take the file size and do an align up POW2 file align. So it looks like these are measuring the size of these in file chunks instead of in virtual size. I don't know, but that's kind of what it looks like. So let's follow suit. Regenerate. Yes, reload it. Pattern editor. Rerun. Diffing. Diff there. Diff there. What is this diff? That's the... rerun the diff. There we go. Boom, boom. Okay. Question. Do you have ideas for what X will be in that diagram? Like visual programming things? Any projects you find inspiring... or you find a lot of inspiration from in that area? It's a great question. So, yeah, I think... so I'm kind of trying to stay open. Like, it would be great to be very concrete with you, and I think it would be cool to have a visual programming build system. Like, okay, I want to have these two things compile and flow into this link. So here's my link, and here's my compile, and then I could have like little let's just draw a picture, right? This is, we're chilling out today, kind of doing low key. Let me just like show you. Okay. So like I can imagine a world where build systems look kind of like this. And what would happen here, what's happening is we've arranged which files go into which kinds of compilers. We've arranged what options we want to parameterize on. So up here, maybe I've got like, is this debug or release mode? Right here, I might have, okay, in my C compiler, do I want to turn on some special thing that only happens in my C compiler? And so like here, I've got like 3 switches. They're like UI buttons. They're like toggles. They're checkboxes. They're something UI-ish. And when I'm using the system, these are like the knobs that I have to run the build however I want. They're like the settings of the build, you might say, the pre-existing conditioning variables. And then they flow in visually into the different steps of the chain here. And then we have our list of source files. We know how they get flowed in. We know how they get linked together. And we know what comes out here, right? I feel like it'd be cool to have a tool like this. I feel like it'd be cool to be able to say like, hey, I know whether or not I'm running this in debugger, like if I'm running optimizations on this thing or that thing or whatever. You could do stuff like selectively, pull out a tiny piece of your code and run it through optimizations while everything else is in debug very easily like this. I mean, you still have to sort it out into the right source files and stuff. But I don't know. I for some reason, I feel like if we started to do low-level stuff this way, we would gain momentum. Now, to generally answer your question, though, I do imagine that, but I'm trying to stay open. Like, I think this piece here could be understood well enough that people could plug in lots of cool X's. And I want to stay open to the possibility that the best X to go here might be something I've never thought of. It might be something somebody else is going to think of. But this is the part I want to get a handle on first. And to answer your final question, any project you find a lot of inspiration from in that area, visual programming things. Honestly, they're all... There's no specific project that I'm like, this is the one. If you want, like, to know where my inspiration comes from, it comes from, first of all, the Future of Coding community, their podcast, also, like, the Robust First Computing people, Dave Ackley, Brett Victor. There's no specific project. I don't think anything is going on in that space that I'm like, that one thing there is the thing that makes the difference. It's more the whole idea. The whole community does give me some inspiration. The thing that I find most uninspiring about it is that I don't feel like they take seriously very often. Like, this is overly general. There are definitely people in Future of Coding who take this seriously, but like, I don't think you're going to revolutionize the way programming works for everybody if you don't go all the way down to the hardware. And so I think putting visual programming together with handmade values, it's like a match that needs to happen to actually break through. Ooh, this has a different image base. Spicy, why does it do that? It doesn't really matter. I guess because it knows it's a DLL, it puts it somewhere else. Well, just so that it doesn't get in the way of the diffing, I'm gonna follow suit. Yeah, I don't think we only need high-level tools, but I think that high-level tools built on low-level tools are sort of, in some way, they are... What's the right way to put this? Every time you write code and build software, you are taking a giant space of potentiality, right? All the things you could do, and you are narrowing that field. And in exchange for narrowing it, you are actualizing a piece of it, right? Like the decisions you've made about how things work already lock in, but they allow you to make more progress on top of that. And so if you want a world where we're not bound to this text file interface, you have to make decisions pretty deep in the hierarchy of decisions. Like you have to go back to the root pretty deep and unroot the text file there. If you only unroot it at the high level, there's still going to be so many layers of text file based compute that it takes just to get your visual thing up. And it's just this little high level thing, but it can't connect and it can't build out and really work together with other things as best as it could have. And one other piece here that's important is low-level programmers are going to have to exist, and we deserve better tools than text files just like everybody else. So there's that too. Uh, 117. Okay, so the flags don't match. Terminal server aware, NX compatible. Mini DLL does not have terminal server aware. I don't know what that means, but let's follow suit. One 140. Okay, so what we're seeing here is the data directories, and so the very first one here the very first one has some data in it. 2020. Let's go look at 2020. Wait. RV. Oh, that's the RVA. So we need to know where 2020 loads according to the sections. R data. Dover Cliff. The tool I'm using is called IMHEX. IMHEX. It's really cool. It's a free open source piece of software. I've been digging it for the last week or two. Yeah. Eight 192. I wish I could view that as hex. Optional header 8224. So isn't there some way I can't do that, but I can do 8224 minus. Okay, we need our calculator. 8192 32 plus pointer of raw data is 1536. 1568 as hex at 620. So right here. Yeah, so that's an export table. And it tells us how to export mini or square. Okay, so I think let's just work on that. I think that was obvious. That was coming sooner or later. Yeah, I've seen the mustache demo before. I think in that one, Casey was not particularly pushing the visualness of it. Or at least he didn't think his particular visual programming design was the best part of Mustache, if I remember correctly. But he also did have some really cool stuff. I think something a lot of people... Something that we really need to do if we're going to get serious about more visual programming tools is we need to get way better at the actual like visual part of it. Like we have to get way better at the tools for arranging and organizing and manipulating the layouts. Like with text files, we know that indentation and white space is irrelevant to the compiler, but we still care about the aesthetics of the layout of what we are creating because we look at it, we intentionally take care and maintain the interface that we're creating for ourselves through the text file. And we need to have the same abilities for any kind of interface, right? And I think Casey did some cool stuff, if I remember correctly, where like you could manipulate one node at a time, but you could also manipulate whole trees at a time. Like there were different ways to grab things so that you could move stuff around in groups. And stuff like that is pretty cool. But yeah, we need a lot more of that. And I'm not sure that I'm the right person to figure all that out. I could try, but that's not quite... Like, I think there are people who care more and who will do a good job at that. If I can... You know, the part that I think I get worried about is, like, we need to converge on a format, though. You know, one cool thing about text files is that they're interchangeable, and that's because everyone agrees to use them. And trying to do visual programming by having every tool have its own format, I just don't buy it. I don't think that's the future. I think we still need an interchangeable format. Speaking of which, I actually saw something. I had to take a note. Let me show you guys this. All right, we're talking visual programming. You're all thinking about how are we going to do visual programming and make it practical with me, right? Check this out. Okay. So there's this thing and I haven't played with it before, but I saw someone at Handmade Boston, the folks from Kagi, the search engine, showed me how they do this. Which is they have like diagrams that they make using this tool. How does that work? Does that do what I want? Not really. I'm not entirely sure what the like the controls are like yet. And so I'm not sure how you do something like I don't know, maybe this is the way you do arrows, you do this sort of thing, right? But it's set up with the ability so you can like lay these things out and you can be like main, right? And then you can be like init. Loop, right? Whatever you want. Point is, you do this, and then there's a export as XML. So you get this XML file, and then if you throw it through an XML parser, you get all the information you would need. You'd have to learn how to parse it and where all the relevant stuff is versus where all the irrelevant stuff is, right? There might be stuff you want to throw away, like position might not matter to you. But you can see we get like my name, that string main hangs out right here. The IDs here, so ZC find next, find next, find the next. You can see we've got source and target, so my arrows tell me by ID which nodes they're connecting. So you can see here that this is like, you could already treat this as a generic format. Now this isn't the format that I think we should run with forever. I think this would have problems. But like the idea that you could make a generic editor and then use the data that comes out of that editor and apply meaning to it after the fact is what I think we need to be doing more of with visual programming. So I don't know. Draw.io seems like a cool way to build your own little visual programming experiments if you want. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't actually tried it yet, but I like it. I like the idea. All right, that's the linker version. So here, right, okay, what we were figuring out, let's get back to the programming for the day. What we were figuring out is that it's time to actually build an export table. So I say we do it for real, right? We figure out how to really build an export table, which means I need to look at my PE format here and sketch out the data structure first. All right, this is going to take a bit of doing, going back and forth here. Let's see. Let's just mark off these little conversations we had earlier. Young Lane, yeah, that's the right idea. You'd sketch something visually, you'd export it into a data format, you'd parse that format and generate code. Exactly. You could generate C code, you could generate like data tables, you could literally generate an executable. Like what you generate is up to you from there. But the point is that you don't have to make your own visual editor and visual data format, like visual data format for the visual structures. You use the ones that are already created by the editor, and then you do what a compiler does. You interpret that data into something meaningful for you. One big downside is we would need to rebuild debuggers. So what's interesting is the debugger works by assuming it knows what the interface for constructing software looked like in the first place, right? So if my interface looks like forcoder, text files, then the reason I can debug with Remedy is because Remedy understands that my interface looks like text files. If I were to build something with draw.io, and even if I generate debug information for whatever I generate, this would come out as XML files, right? Because it thinks the XML file is the interface. So what do we do if we change the interface for constructing software and then we want to visualize the runtime characteristics of our program back onto that interface, but we don't want that interface to be text files anymore? And from what I can tell, we have to build a new debugger, which is why we can't afford to have a different interface for everything all the time. We still need a converged core structure. I mean, another thing you could do is go the live programming route, where runtime characteristics on the data structure is built into the environment you're running all the time. But I think that the inflexibility of a system that cannot separate them is a problem sometimes. Ideally, we could do both. Ideally, we could have a format where if you want to live program it, you can, but when you need to, you don't have to. When you need to, you don't. When you need to do it without live programming, that you could still do that too. And that's where, if you haven't listened to my podcast episode with Yasser, he will make the case that that's why we need to do JIT instead of native, and I think he might be right. Okay. So what I'm trying to get to here is we want to get busy sketching out this. So timestamp, version, binary name, ordinal base. Export count. Ordinal count. Young Lane asks, is creating a visual programming like system on the roadmap, or are you just brainstorming? So I'm not exactly shooting for making my own visual programming system. I mean, I might someday. But the reason I call my work practical research, right, let's go. You know, if you're listening to this, all the stuff we're talking about, this is the whole point of the Mr. Fourth Lab, practical software research. My concern is that we do not spend a lot of time actually figuring out how to do a good job at the practice side of programming and sharing information about that. Like, I think people who do try don't treat it as a research problem. They seem to just get their own gut instincts, come up with rules of thumb that have worked for them in some scenario and export them. And so I like to think that, like, the first step here isn't to build a visual programming system, but it's to figure out how we would systematically build visual programming systems over and over and over again and actually make them practical every time, right? Like, if we had a formula that was as easy as, you know, it's so easy to just sit down and create a C-like. It's not so easy, but, like, you can make a C-like with no extra features. You just do your basic C-like language, and plenty of people have done that at this point. And even if it's not a tool you switch to, like, you can still build code with it, run code with it. If you do, you know, if you generate object files, you can link it to other code. Like, it immediately fits in with the existing systems and starts working. So I think we need to get way better at coming up with new ways for things to fit in. And that's the part I'm going to focus on for a while. I think if we get good at that, if we get good at mastering the tool chains again and have new ideas about how to arrange the tool chains, that it will open up the opportunity for people who are better at the visual side of things than me to actually make tools that make a bigger impact because they will fit in practically if I succeed. So that's the part I'm focusing on. If I do, I might someday make a visual programming system, but I don't think that, like, the visual part of it isn't actually my forte. I do believe if someone made a really great visual programming system, I think I would pick it up and be good at it. Like, it's not that I'm bad at visual programming. I just don't know that visual design is one of the things I'm going to contribute. I'm certainly not very close to having any ideas on that end right now. Export VOF. So I think that's just like the exports. That's like a list of exports. Actually, you know, let's back up here. Export count isn't really right. That's low level correct, but let's look at the high level. What we're saying is we have an export count. The export VOF is like a pointer to it. So what we really have is a list of exports. Also, I'm going to say another thing about the question about what am I thinking about creating a visual programming like system. I think that there's another kind of alternative programming system that is not visual programming, but that is just how do I put this? That is just data structure programming. It is it's not necessarily the case that the best thing we need is nodes and wires for everything. I think a node and wire format that is regular, that could be shared and reused and covers 99% of node wire type cases would be cool. It's probably possible. But I think there's another thing that we need that I might actually be more interested in building, which is not about being super visual, but it's about the structuring. So Dion was about this a little bit too, right? The idea of an abstract syntax tree. But what was really cool about it to me that I think is more important than the abstract syntax tree part is the fact that it was structured. If you look at my Splink demo, I did this thing where like each piece of code lived in its own little data block, and you could do things with them like treat them as tests. So like this right here is a test, and it will constantly you can't see, it's actually cut off in the screenshot, but it's constantly giving you a feedback report of like, hey, this test is succeeding or failing. So you can make little lists of different pieces of your code. So here I've got everything related to my RNG, the RNG code itself plus the RNG tests. Over here I have all of my tests, which would include the RNG test again. But like you can see, I'm starting to be able to structure my interface much more flexibly with a data structure. And none of this is about it being visual. And I think that there's stuff there that I will spend more time on. Yeah, I don't think nodes and wires is appropriate all the time or even as often as people want to use it. I think it I am convinced that like there are good use cases though. I've seen the one that the people at Kagi use, and that the reason it works so well for them is because they are doing like a dispatch system for asynchronous processing, and so the linearness of textual code actually is a big problem, and the non-linearness of a diagram fits it very nicely. And they also put a good amount of work into maintaining the visual structure. Like it's not just the data clobbered in there, they are trying to lay it out so that the diagram can be legible and maintainable, which isn't always what people do, but I think it's necessary. Okay, so we have a list of exports. We need a list of ordinals. What else do we have here? List of ordinals. All right, there's this thing about forwarding strings. VOF to a symbol. Or, okay, so yeah, we need to go and define what an export is and what a ordinal is now. So we have that much, but we need to say that when we say export, what we're talking about is, let's see, what is an export? Each one's a 32-bit integer. How does the 32-bit integer of the export work? It's a v-off, but it's either in one of two ranges, and depending on which range it's in, we interpret it differently. Let's see here in my dumper, I have encoded this. Export. All right, it's a forwarder if export range min and export range max. Okay, so if it's within a certain range, got it. So an export is sort of either a symbol v-off what is that? Either a symbol v-off or it's a forwarder name. Is the main high level structure there. And an ordinal is a name and an index into the I guess what we really need here is just name and ordinal would work, right? Okay. So the next step I want to take, I gotta remember, this is like chill stream day. I don't wanna feel pressured. Feeling a little worked up after this much dissecting the low-level code. So let me give myself a sec. Okay. So next what I want to do is I want to think about which of these I can figure out by just sort of automatically. Timestamp, I want the user to pass it to me. I want them to decide what the timestamp is. That's just information. Version, I want the user to pass to me. Binary name. So that's the name of the final export. I think that this should be set by the user. Ordinal base. Can we automate that away? What was the deal with ordinal base? Is it like actually interesting? Is it ever anything other than like 1 or 0? Is that what it's supposed to, is like the same thing all the time? It is usually set to 1. I think we're going to just take that. Right, so that's not up to the user. Now this part here is interesting. Okay. So here's the structure. Since each ordinal these come in parallel, right? Each ordinal is like a pointer into one of these, right? Why don't I write this down like this? What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that for each ordinal, actually, no. Let's do it this way. For each ordinal, there is a mapping to an export. Right, we can just do an ordinal index into the exports to turn an ordinal into an export. There might be two ordinals that, like, you know, the list might contain multiple ordinals that point to the same export. There might be exports that are not covered here, so this is neither onto or one to one. Now, what this means, because of this, the existence of this property, is that we can rearrange this part here, list of exports and list of names and ordinals in the following way. we'll call it a gen export, a generator export, is, well, first of all, it's an export. Remember, an export is defined up here. It's either a symbol VOF or a forwarding name. And it's a list of names. Okay? Now, the reason we can do this, right, and then well, let me, actually, I'm going to just kind of fit this all in up here. List of names. And then what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to take a list of gen exports and map that to the list of export and list of name and ordinal. And the reason I want to do that is because this structure here is going to be easier to manipulate, right? In order to get a list of gen exports, all we have to do is say, okay, here's the pointer to the symbol I want, here's the name for it, or here are the names for it. This can be an empty list, it can be a list with one name, it can be a list with multiple names, right? But we're saying here are the names, 0 or more names for this export. Here's a list of all of such exports, and then bake. Boom, we get this thing, right? How does this work? Well, we have a list of exports by just pulling off each export. For each name on each export, we generate a new one of these with the ordinal pointing back to the export, right? That's why it was significant that we have each ordinal can map to an export. So this is the plan. Here we go. So the gen exports Now, I don't think we will actually know the VOF yet, so let's give it a label instead. Labels resolve to v-offs during layout. So that lets us build our export, but now we have to go and do that. Right, so main actually needs to get rewritten too. I'll need to build a version of main that's a little different. Let's come back to that. Okay. Okay. So now this is feeling like too much. I know what I need to do next, but it's too much for me to do it right now. I have the data structure. The next step is to come up here to the layout function. And while this is happening, I need to start thinking about how I'm going to generate the R data and set up the export directory. And there's a lot there, right? There's a lot there. Like, to do that, I'm now, for the first time, I'm generating a buffer from scratch. And I'm attaching that into the layout, and I'm generating a section to contain that buffer that was not specified to me by the user, which changes the way the API thinks and feels. Like I might need to have the user specify an RData section and pass that down to me and then fill that in. I might need to do something pre-layout that's like fill RData from exports. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of design stuff here. There's a lot of format fiddly stuff here. There's a lot of refactoring here. And I've got like 20 minutes, 15 minutes left on my stream time, sort of. And I'm also just like, this was going to be a chill day, and I think this is the end of chill. This is going to be hardcore. This might even be the kind of thing I don't do on stream. It might be the kind of thing I do at a coffee shop, where I can like lock in for 4 hours and grind. There's a lot. So I think I'm going to just stop here. I think I need a break. I think maybe I will take a little break and then maybe post up at the coffee shop later and grind out this part and see if I can do it. We got to redo the main part still. Yeah, so we're going to save the goal. Yeah, let's see. Loosely structured exports. So something about this that's kind of annoyingly tricky is that layout has to happen in order to resolve labels to VOFs, which means we can't even finish the export data like export data has to go through the pointer system. You know what I'm saying? Whenever we generate one of these exports, then what we're going to do is we're going to generate a block of data, and wherever we wanted to generate a VOF, we're going to have to use this label to create a pointer to that label to actually fill that thing in. Cool. Okay. And is there anything else? Oh yeah, I still need to come up with a construction interface for this stuff. Okay. Well, I think that this is a good stopping point. I'm probably going to need to do a grind session, and it might be easier to do that off stream and in a different environment for some. I can't tell you why. I just am having a feeling that that's what I'm going to need for this part. So I think I'm going to wrap up here. Again, if you've been hanging out, I appreciate it so much. Everyone chatting today, asking questions about visual programming. It's a lot of fun. It's interesting to share ideas. And if you like what I'm working on, you'd like to see me make more progress on this kind of stuff, do you think about going over to mrforth.com/membership? This is, I'm living off of this, so I'm able to keep doing it if people choose to support the lab. So think about that. And with that, I will sign off for the day, and I'll see you around the internet. Bye.